So over the past weekend, I had time to go see exactly one movie. And I debated between a few, but ultimately I chose Moonfall.
You chose poorly.
And you know a movie's bad when the sentence, "I should have gone to see Jackass," comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, dude.
Moonfall is a science fiction disaster film centered around the premise of the moon falling out of orbit and crashing into Earth. It stars Patrick Wilson, Halle Berry, Michael Pena, and John Bradley, and it was produced, directed, and co-written by Roland Emmerich. And just a quick heads up, I'm gonna be just a little bit harsh in this review, because if you couldn't tell from my intro, I absolutely hated this movie.
Hated it.
Now, Roland Emmerich has always been hit or miss, but spoiler alert, he's a lot more miss.
Get him.
If he was an MLB player, his batting average would be worse than the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Get him.
If he was an NFL quarterback, he'd be Mark Sanchez.
Get him.
My biggest issue with his directing style is most of his movies just feel too similar to one another. And I don't mean in a good way, like when you put in a Tarantino movie and you instantly know that Tarantino directed it. Emmerich's narrative structure, his characters, and just his basic formula, it's really just kind of feeling outdated and like he's kind of run out of ideas. So this just feels like a lesser version of some previous better movies that he did. Like you have the impending global disaster, like in 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow or Independence Day. And then of course you have the government trying to cover it up. You always seem to have the one nerdy or seemingly crazy character that makes this discovery before anybody else.
I've made a shocking discovery.
And then lastly, you have this character that is down on their luck because of a mistake they made. Now, he did come out with a few great films. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we had stuff like The Patriot, Independence Day, Stargate, stuff like that. But even during his prime, he gave us titles such as 1998's Godzilla and Eight-Legged Freaks. But we're here to talk about Moonfall, so let's get into it. And before I go over all the things I disliked about this movie, I'm gonna at least try to find something positive to say about it. First and foremost, the premise of the moon falling out of orbit and crashing into Earth is certainly an intriguing one, and it definitely has moments where it delivers on that premise and makes us as the viewers feel the impending doom. To go right along with that point, the third act of the film does have some exciting sequences, and at times can be enjoyable. And then finally, there are some pretty good visuals and CGI throughout the runtime, even though this movie had a budget of $140 million, so it should look good. But hey, I'm just trying to find a couple positives in a movie that really didn't have many. Yes, Moonfall had a budget of $140 million, and it only made $10 million back during its opening weekend in the United States.
That's what the kids call epic fail.
And there are just so many reasons that this movie bombed so badly, but the first and most glaring flaw that I want to talk about is the writing. The dialogue and line delivery was so bad in this movie that they somehow managed to make Patrick Wilson, Michael Pena, and Halle freaking Berry look like mediocre actors, which is impressive in its own right. I haven't watched any interviews with them since this movie came out, but I can't imagine they were happy delivering some of these lines. A part of me is maybe wondering if they had a ghostwriter by the name of Tommy Wiseau?
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
And to go right along with the poor writing, I would say that about 90% of the humor fell flat in this movie. Like John Bradley's character KC, he was meant to crack the jokes and be the comedic relief, but at the best of times, his jokes weren't funny. And at the worst, well, they were just flat out cringy.
It's on airplane mode.
The script was just trying way too hard to insert these jokes in moments where they really weren't needed. Like, do you ever watch something and you're embarrassed for the people in it? That's what this film was like the entire time. Like, I was turning my head from the screen like it was me up there. And just a quick note to Hollywood, because obviously they watch my videos. Not every movie needs to follow the Marvel formula. It's okay to do your own thing. Next, I would say there are just way too many conveniences that bring these characters together. It felt so forced. The two biggest examples of this are first when they have this entire team that they're getting ready to launch into space, but of course everybody gets sent home except who? Well, of course our main three characters, including one guy who has never even been to space. He's not even with NASA, but you wouldn't know that based on how he knows how to operate everything in the rocket. You know how people train their entire lives to understand all these buttons and controls? Well, this guy just knows how to do it without any training. He's perfect at it. And the same exact thing applies to our families of the main characters. As far as these conveniences go, everybody in this base gets sent home on an airplane except three characters. Halle Berry's son, her nanny, and Patrick Wilson's son. And this was done solely so that the three of them were together.
Well, isn't that convenient for you?
And then speaking of their families, every scene with them just felt so out of place. Like during the second half of this movie, I really felt like I was watching two separate films here. Like for the most part, I was enjoying the scenes with the three main characters in space. But then we would cut back to the families of our main characters, and I guess it's not enough that they're trying to survive a global emergency. They had to add in these characters that are like trying to rob them. And at one point we even got a car chase scene that was like an even shittier version of Fast and Furious, an already shitty franchise.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
Honestly, the biggest laughs I got from this movie were these moments that were meant to be serious. Like when Sonny takes that car and they jump over this huge gap, and then later when Michelle and Sonny clear another huge gap on foot. It was so ridiculous that I was just laughing out loud in the theater. I'm sure I was getting a few dirty looks, but at that point I didn't even care. I was just having a great time for all the wrong reasons. I will say that Moonfall is a conspiracy theorist's wet dream, as Casey believes that the moon is actually an artificial megastructure. And spoiler alert, he's right. The final 30 minutes of this movie is where it gets fucking wacky and way more complicated than it ever needed to be. It just turns into this like Matrix ripoff where Patrick Wilson's character learns that the moon was actually constructed by ancestors that were more technologically advanced and used the moon as an ark to repopulate humanity, which was getting attacked by artificial intelligence? I swear I'm not making this up. Your head will hurt during the final act of this movie. But not only does it rip off The Matrix, it also rips off another space-based disaster movie where one character has to stay behind with the bomb, and at the last second, somebody else than the person that was supposed to stay behind sacrifices themselves instead. Sound familiar?
You can't do this to me! This is my job!
You go take care of my little girl now. That's your job.
And the worst part of it all is, unlike Armageddon that killed Bruce Willis, this movie didn't even have the guts to kill the character that stayed behind. He somehow survives a direct impact explosion, and the final scene of this movie seems to hint at a sequel that I hope never sees the light of day. So overall, Moonfall just fails in so many ways. Don't go into this expecting to see Apollo 13 or The Martian, Interstellar, or Armageddon. This movie has so many flaws and almost nothing to redeem it. I think I might have just found my first entry into my worst movies of 2022. But that's gonna do it for my review of Moonfall. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this movie. Were you with the majority of people that absolutely hated it? Or did you actually have a pretty good time with it? Let me know down in the comments. And while I have you, me and a couple buddies have a pop culture podcast called Culture Shocked. You can find the link for that in the description. If you're a podcast person, give it a listen, let me know what you think. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing right over here so you don't miss any future content. And to see other movie reviews, rankings, video game rankings, you can see some of those right over here. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.